Good morning! Magandang umaga po! Have you ever asked yourself a question, when I go back to the Philippines, should I buy a house or should I just rent a house? This is one tough question that everybody will have to address, anybody who's going back to the Philippines. Of course, the other option is for you to just live with your relatives, but very seldom will that happen. So today we're going to explore how you will analyze your situation. Firstly, we're going to look at a real estate, whether it's a condominium or a single home, as an investment. And secondly, we will look at it as a house that you're going to occupy. And then the third one is looking at the non-quantitative evaluation, meaning what is important, what's not important, subjective judgments that you will apply in deciding whether you should buy a house or you should just rent a house. So, hang loose. We'll get to it. The first thing we have to do, as I mentioned, is we're going to take a look at how to evaluate an investment. This is a very complicated calculation of what an investment should be. However, I am not going to go through the technicalities and things like that. I'd like to make it as simple as I possibly can for you. So just try to understand the concept. Don't worry about the calculations. But these are the assumptions that I made. Whenever you do an economics like this, you will have to come up with assumptions, some of which will come to fruition, some of which will not, some of which will differ. So it's a judgment call. You can come up with your own scenario, but of course calculating it, this is on a spreadsheet, is going to be quite difficult, but you will understand the concept towards the end. So make sure you stay until the end. The assumptions I'm going to make is that you will buy a house worth, let's say, 6 million. And for ease of calculation, we will just call this a condominium rather than a house. Because in the house, you can depreciate the house, but not the land. In a condominium, you can depreciate everything because you do not own the land, okay? So let's assume that you will buy a $6 million home. That's dollars. I'm sorry, pesos. Okay, 6 million pesos home. And that would rent for about 40,000 pesos a month. Okay, that the exchange rate today, let's say, is 52. It fluctuates between 51 and 52. Let's say it's 52. And that 5 years from now, and then you will notice here, I'm not looking at 2 years, I'm not looking at 10 years. The reason is 10 years, guess what? The further out you go, the more unlikely things are going to happen. Things are going to change. So many things could be different. 2 years, on the other hand, may be too short, although it's easier to understand and calculate. So 5 years to me is optimum for real estate investment. If you go beyond that, if your assumptions are favorable, good for you. If the assumptions are not favorable, too bad, but those are just assumptions, okay? So let's say it's going to rent for 40,000 pesos a month. That's about $800 a month, okay? And let's assume that at the end of 5 years, you will probably sell it and convert that money back and bring it back to the US, because there's a good chance that you have children here in the US and you will want to come back to the US. Those are just assumptions. You may decide to stay in the Philippines forever, and that's your call. And if you even Americans, let's say, who are looking at investments, this is going to be the same process. The only difference is you will get at the end of 5 years what you will get, and you don't have to worry about any conversion. And you will see here that all my analysis is in dollars. The first year I'm going to show you will be in pesos, then I'll convert it to dollars, and then everything will be in dollars thereafter. Okay? We will assume that there's going to be a vacancy of about 1 month a year. But that 1 month a year, your place is going to be vacant. Okay, and let's assume that the annual rent will go up by about 9%. Condo fee will increase about 7%. Other expenses will increase about 5%. and property tax will increase about 5%. All right, so that is the assumption we are going to make, and I'm not going to be going through this. We'll go through a PowerPoint presentation where I will show you the numbers in a condensed format. Okay, so here goes. This is going to be the scenario for the first year. First, we will look at it in Philippine peso. And let's say that your rent income is 40,000 a month. That will be 480,000 pesos a year. I meant 40,000 pesos a month. Okay. Depreciation is a non-cash. You are not paying cash for it, but you're allowed to depreciate it over a period of time because of the, let's say, condominium. And for this purpose, I'm just using a straight line method, which you can deduct for the purpose of calculating how much your taxable income is. So let's say it's 307,000 pesos. Your cash expenses will be 162. Now, what's cash expenses made of? Well, it consists of the condominium fee, which you will pay, the management fee. Let's say it's 1 month's rent. Let's assume that you will have it managed by a company. Obviously, if you manage it yourself, you save that kind of money. There's going to be a vacancy allowance, meaning in, let's say, 1 month, either you give 1 month free rent, or let's say you say 1 month will be vacant before you get the next tenant. So you are not going to have full 12 months. Maybe you'll get 12 months, but the 13th month it's going to be empty until you find another tenant. Then other expenses like utilities, common area utilities, and we will assume here that your tenant will be paying their own utilities like light, water, telephone, cable, things like that, okay? But those are going to be expenses you will have to shoulder. Now, as I said, we will assume that there's a 9% increase every year. So in the first year, you will wind up, after you deduct these two items from the 480, 469,000 of total expenses, you will wind up with a taxable income of 10.3 or 10,300 pesos. Your income tax on that will be about 500 pesos, and your after-tax income is 9.8. Now, we're not even going to talk about how is tax calculated, because tax is calculated on a progressive basis in the Philippines. For example, up to 10,000 pesos is 5%, from 10,000 to 30,000 is 10%, and then from 30,000 to 70,000 it's 15%. It keeps on going up as your income goes up. So that's how that's calculated, but I'm not going to show you the tax calculation to keep things simple and finish this video within maybe 10 to 15 minute time frame. All right. So let's say that you will pay tax of 500 pesos. You'll wind up with an after-tax income of 9,800 pesos. Your cash flow, how do you calculate that? Will be take this and add back the depreciation, which is non-cash. Everything else here will be cash. This is non-cash. By the way, I said this total expense is pretty high. That's because it includes 40,000 pesos of 1 month that your house will be vacant. We could either say, well, that is not an expense. Okay, fine. So this will become 122, and then you will reduce this 480 by 40, so that will be 440. Your bottom line is still the same. Okay, so it will still be 10,003, whether you put that vacancy allowance as a deduction against rent or putting it here as an expense. All right. So you're looking at after-tax income of 9,008 pesos, or cash flow for the first year of 317,300 pesos. Now, to earn that, this is during the beginning of the year. Before you have all this income and expenses generated, you have to buy the property. And let's say you bought it for a total investment after all expenses and everything for 6,000 pesos. Converted at 52, that is $115,000. That is what you paid for the condo and for which you're going to have this cash flow in the first year. So let's now convert your first year cash flow into dollars, again converting it into conversion rate of 52 to 1. That's 9.2, and then depreciation 5.9, cash expenses 3.1, 9, 2, divide everything by 52, and therefore, your cash flow for the first year is $6,100. Now, what's the second year? As you can see, rent income went up, okay? Depreciation will stay constant. Cash expenses goes up a little bit. Total expenses, your taxable income is here, income tax, after tax, and then after cash flow per year will be your net income, added the depreciation non-cash expense. So you wind up with this much income. Then we go to year 3, same deal. Year 4, same deal. I'm going to show you year 5. So you can see rent is going up, depreciation is staying constant, expenses is going up, taxable income is going up. Obviously, as taxable income goes up, your tax expense goes up, and your after-tax income is here. You add the depreciation expense, and you wind up with a cash flow per year of that much. Now, let's look at year 5 when you sell the property. Okay. Now, again, this is just the same as the other years. Okay. So here it's 8.3, but that's not all you have. Let's say you sold this condominium for the net proceeds of 8,216,000 pesos. But the exchange rate at the end of 5 years is now 58 instead of 52. So now this analysis will be the same for US type of analysis, except that taxes will be different. Depreciation method could be different. And of course, there will not be any conversion rate. Everything will be dollars and nothing will be converted. But this one is going to be converted. So that 8.2 million pesos of proceeds converted to that will be 141,000. Now, let's take a look at this. You invested $115,000. You had this much cash generation. And then on year 5, you have this $8,300 and $141,700. So the sum of all this is a negative cash flow, positive cash flow, huge positive cash flow in year 5. That is equivalent to a 9.9% return on your investment. So it's not bad. So where can you get money with a 9.9% return on investment, right? So now we are going to take a look at this when you own the property and you stay in it. Okay, you are going to live in it instead of renting it. So here goes the analysis. Here's the analysis. If you are occupying the property, you're not going to have any rent income. You will have cash expenses of 67.8, and this will be your cash flow per year. And you watch, this is a negative number. Obviously, when you're staying in a condo, you will have condo fee, utilities. Now, I'm not talking about utilities for occupying the property. This is common area utilities. I intentionally excluded the utilities that you pay when you are living in it, because whether you're living in it or renting an apartment, it will be the same. So I said I excluded that. So I only included, consistent with the first analysis I showed you, only the common area utilities and such. Okay. So here is your negative cash flow. Now, you will have to spend 115,000 to begin with, and then year 1, you will see that negative cash flow, cash expenses is 1,003, and then it becomes 1,004, then it becomes 1,005, 1,006. All right? So every year you have a negative cash flow, unlike the other analysis, which shows every year you have positive cash flow, obviously because you are earning rent income. Here you're not earning rent income. So here is year 5, still up a little bit, up, negative cash flow of 1.7, and then a nice positive cash flow. And this amount is exactly the same as the first illustration, okay? So what it is showing you is that your 115,000 plus this much, plus this much, plus this much, plus this much, plus this much investment every year. And then at the end of the year, you wind up with 141,000 positive. That's equivalent to a 3% return. 3% return compared to 9.9% if you are renting it. Okay, now I'm going to show you the summary. Okay, here is the summary. For the entire 5 years, this is for the entire 5 year summary, you made $55,300 here and nothing here because it's owner occupied. You depreciated this much, meaning you're able to deduct it from your tax return. You have no tax deduction here since it's not being rented out. Your cash expenses is this much. Well, you have less cash expenses when you're occupying the property because included in here is the 1 month. Keep in mind, 1 month vacancy. Instead of reducing it from the rent, I just put it there as expense. It will have the same effect here. So from a negative 47.9, you only spent 7.9 over a 5 year period. So your taxable income is here, but you don't care about taxable or income tax because you are not renting it. Okay. So what is your cash flow? Your cash flow is $35,008 for the 5 year period versus negative $7,005. This is your total investment, the same, and this is your net proceeds at the end of 5 years, exactly the same. And your internal rate of return is 9.9% per year. Okay, that's not the return for the entire 5 years. That is per year, and this is 3% per year. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Some people will say, oh, why am I going to buy a house? A lot of people commented on my previous illustration. I can rent a house for $200 a month. Come on. I know you can, but you have to make things apples to apples. You cannot compare a $6 million condominium to a $200 rental place. How much do you think, what kind of rental are you going to pay if you want the exact same property? If you want the amenities of a swimming pool, no maintenance from the outside. All you have to do is to maintain the inside. You have security, etc., etc. How much would you rent? Probably 40,000 pesos a month. The same amount you're renting your unit for. So we just have to be realistic about that. Okay? So here is the bottom line result. When you're renting it out and you are also spending 40,000 pesos in another condominium, you will make 9.9% here, but you'll be paying 40,000 a month pesos. Okay. Whereas when you occupy, you don't pay any rent, but you will only get a return of 3% because you get the appreciation. But of course, you will also have annual expenses of 7,500 over a 5 year period. Okay. So that is something you have to keep in mind. The thing you have to think about is when you buy a house and rent it, you have to find a place where you are going to stay. You have to pay for something, okay? So you have to either buy another house or another condominium or rent somewhere. So in the first instance that I showed, well, there is a rental income on top and then expenses, blah, blah, blah. At the end of 5 years, you make 9.9%. But if you decide to stay in the unit, you will have no rent, but you will have continuing expenses until the end of 5 years, you sell it at a profit. Okay, and I use a 9% appreciation rate, which is less than the 12% I believe is the appreciation rate, but sometimes it could be low, just to be conservative. And you wind up making money. Of course you do. But if you decide to rent, let's assume that you're going to rent a $40,000 condominium, guess what? You have that $151,000 that you would have invested, or is it 151 or 104? Well, anyway, 100,000 plus that you would have invested in a condominium and put it in the stock market, in the mutual fund, in bonds, etc., etc. Do you think you will make 3.3? Probably you will be able to beat that return and make more. For example, an average investment nowadays is running at about 10%, but of course that's today. In the past, it wasn't that way. So that is something you have to evaluate. Should I just rent, let's say, a 40,000 peso condominium per month, and then invest the money that I would have invested in this condominium, invest it elsewhere, and make better than 3.3%? Or would you rather put it in? There are some risks when you do that. The value could come down. Inflation rate, not inflation rate, I meant currency exchange rate could go sky high. We don't know. On the other hand, it could be the other way around, okay? The value could be even higher than that, especially if you're staying in that house or condominium for longer than 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe even 15 or 20 years. So now let's take a look at what are the subjective items that we need to think about between buying and selling a house or a condominium. I'll show it to you. We'll start with the home ownership. What are the advantages? Well, it offers long-term security, equity, and potential growth in personal wealth. It's some kind of a forced savings, because chances are if you don't put that money in a piece of real estate, you may wind up spending it or losing it or giving it to relatives and so forth and so on. Allows you greater freedom in its use and style without restrictions by a landlord. So you have the complete freedom to renovate it if you want, to decorate it. You have the option of renting it to generate income. And you can borrow money against the equity as equity builds up to pay for major purchases. That's like a home equity loan. You have possible tax deductions related to income generating properties if it is rented out. So that is especially true in the United States when you're actually taxed on your net income, not the so-called capital gains tax in the Philippines. So this may only be applicable in the case of United States or outside of the Philippines, the way taxation is done in the Philippines. What are the disadvantages? Well, you have to be responsible for possible huge financial responsibility, including regular house maintenance, additional cost to the homeowner, which usually includes interest if you have it financed. Well, in the illustration I have, I assume that you're retiring and you have cash money. You can't afford the mortgage anymore, so there's no interest, but you're responsible for taxes, insurance, and maintenance. You run the risk of not making any profit from the resale if the economy turns belly up. You are also less mobile if you want to move from one place to another in a rental situation. It's just a matter of packing things up and going. But this one, you have to get rid of the property. Now, what are the advantages of renting? Allows more flexibility than owning a home, ideal for those who could be faced with sudden changes, like change of jobs. Well, since you're retired, how about divorce? Maybe if you are divorced or if you decide to go back to the US or Canada or whatnot. The possibility of living in an area which you could not afford to buy. Okay, sometimes you want to live in this $40,000 home, but you can only afford to spend, as some of my viewers said, $200 a month. Then obviously renting is a choice for you, not buying. The only insurance that will be required is to cover the content of the home when you are renting. Because the landlord is responsible for the house. It's his. You will have additional money which you can invest elsewhere, just like what I mentioned. You can put it in the stock market, mutual funds, or whatever. The disadvantages is the lease agreement can impact the freedom to use and renovate the property. You want to make changes, but then you're restricted. Same here. Cannot make changes to a rented property without the consent of the lessor. Often you have to deal with the rental agent, making the issue longer to resolve. Of course, if you're dealing directly with the homeowner, that's a different story. There is no wealth creation here in the case of renting. Whatever you pay is considered spent. You have no control over annual rental fluctuation. Your rent could go up. Okay, so that's a reality, very, very much a reality. And there is no guarantee that a lessee will be renewed when it expires. Suppose you really like the place, so you love it, and you'd like to stay in it, but there's no guarantee that you can, because they may change their mind, they don't want to rent anymore, or the increase in rent may be too high that you're forced to move out. Well, there you have it, guys. Buying a house, buying a condominium, renting a house, renting a condominium, those are decisions you will have to make. I wish you luck. If you have any questions, if you need clarification on any specific area, I know this is a little bit complicated and it took longer than 15 minutes, but feel free to put in the comment section. I try to respond to all comments in my videos, and I'll be more than happy to get back to you. Meanwhile, I will appreciate it if you could like, share, and subscribe to my channel so that you will be notified of all the new videos that I'm making out. Okay? I will see you later, and have a great day.